1%, what could it be? And I had all these reasons to blame everybody but me, until I finally grasped the idea that I know what it takes. I have what it takes. I've been there before. I've owned multiple businesses throughout my life and career. I've been successful in the corporate world. I'm bilingual. I mean, I can do it, and I can do it again. And went back to basics, reading some of my favorite books from people like Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, um, and others. And at the end of the day, pulled it back together and pulled resources. And this is another thing a lot of people don't do, and that is I pulled the power of resources with networking. The people and can you bring that? Can you work with people trust the people and do business with them?
And we are back on the Money, Mindset, and Mentoring podcast. We have Marco Torres, who I met down at PodFest. And Marco had an absolutely amazing story. And I thought, man, I got to get him on my show because he had the whole table was just sitting there and waiting for the next word to come out because of what he was going on. And I was like, man, we got to talk. So we chatted afterwards and I said, let's get you on the show. So Marco, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Steve. I look forward to this chat.
Beautiful. Wasn't PodFest great? I thought PodFest was just such an amazing experience.
Absolutely. I learned a lot from it. And now the hard part is implementing a lot of those things to continue to grow and expand.
Yeah. It's an event like that. It's 4 days of absolute fun, tons of people and lots of learning. So, but now it's the implementation. They say that an event creates adrenaline where a system creates success. And so that's now it's time to implement the system. So
absolutely.
Beautiful. So let's talk a little bit about your story because, obviously I know your story, but the listeners don't. You went through an absolutely amazing growth and then had a pivot. So talk to a little bit about what that looked like.
Well, sure. I mean, I've been a bit of an entrepreneur most of my life. Started at, by the age of 12, I built the biggest paper out, my local newspaper ever seen. And I was featured on the front page of the newspaper, which I forgot all about it until recently when I was going through my dad's old files and found he had clippings of me on the front page with that. By the age of 23, I had 5 restaurants and a nightclub, and went on from there to get into the corporate world. To make a long story short here, I went into the corporate world in 2000 with internet marketing strategies for a big company. And I promised them we'd do $200 million in sales if they hired me to do it. And eventually we did. So we were cranking it out. I generated almost $1 billion of internet sales for this company until 2008, which came to a crashing halt. And then it was, I had to fire 2,000 telemarketers, and then I got fired. And I can take a break and let you ask anything there if you want.
No, what I heard there was you took a company, focus on the internet space in the early years, well, I would say the mid years of internet, and blew that thing up. And you said billions of dollars of sales. And then there was something that made a massive pivot in that business that it completely collapsed. What was that point? What was the turning point on that one?
Well, the turning point was the crash of 2008 in the financial district. This industry that I was, pushing was wrapped around the mortgage and real estate industry. And, that completely dried up. There was no mortgage to be had for any, industry at the time. And so that industry, was wiped out, rug pulled out from under us. And I was a big, vice president of this company, and I owned a small business on the side with my wife. And I thought, okay, they fired me, no problem. I will bounce laterally. I will find another position. And I started, getting the resume ready and so forth. Of course, my business also failed due to the economy crash in 2008. And so then I was restructuring that business, relaunching it, trying different ways, going through savings, trying to get a job laterally, looking for another vice president, high level CEO position or what have you. And nothing was coming my way. And a couple of years into this, by the time I'm realizing it starts to turn into a real disaster as funds started to eventually dry up. And, I jokingly laugh about it now and say I had one of my best sales years ever, 2009. I mean, I sold my house, I sold my cars, I sold my boat, I sold my motorcycle, I sold my furniture, I sold my jewelry. literally, it was, went from living down the street, down the road from Tiger Woods in Windermere, Florida, near Orlando area, and to almost being homeless. I had to move out of Orlando to start over. I don't like talking about this story, but it might inspire others depending upon where you're at in life that you can bounce back. And I had to get out of town because I couldn't hold my hat in my hand and start from the bottom in Orlando, where I was, in my mind anyway, somewhat of a very known, big figure after having been in charge of thousands of people with a big company that I was with. And so I moved to Miami, or motel on the beach in Hollywood Beach, actually, and was doing door to door sales and excuse me, but I mean, I was doing door to door sales by day and by night waiting tables. That's how far back I went in my mid 40s. I went back to my roots of being a restaurant owner, and I went back to waiting tables, which I knew could pay the bills, while I knocked on doors to generate sales for a PR firm, and eventually found my way back.
And when was the hockey stick moment from that, when you said, okay, time to put down the apron and stop waiting tables? What was that point like?
Well, that was a short term gig, but thankfully, but it was very, very humbling. Let me tell you, from coming from a big position to back to waiting tables, and uh, man, it was one of the worst 6 months of my life probably. But I got back. I finally found another position that hired me to back into the marketing world, and then that turned around right away. They had me traveling around the world selling digital technology, and that uh, deal lasted a while. But I went back to the travel business that I was in during we were uh, in the travel business that I was developing on the marketing side, and we were actually in the timeshare industry, is what I built that $1 billion during those 8 years. And got back with some partners that had previously known in the travel space, and we started building a company at the time called bookvip.com, which became one of the fastest growing travel sites in North America. And we blew that up and became experts at that, and really, really, really blowing that up. And then we eventually launched a business that I run today, which kind of came about by accident. But from the travel space that we were in, we ended up launching a company called Marketing Boost that I run and I'm thrilled with today, where we serve thousands of business owners around the world and support them with adding value versus discounting.
Yeah, we were talking about that a little earlier, about the idea of, a lot of times, I mean, we've seen, the last few years was all about, do you just got the stuff, right? Like, you go to a car lot and you want to buy a car, and it's just, you wanted to get the red one, but that's going to be 8 months. You want to get the blue one, that's going to be 2 years. So you're just like, can I just get a car? And that's what it's been for all during those lockdown periods. Now we look at the new normal, and the new normal is that people are actually having to work to get sales now again. It's taking some effort to convert clients into prospects into buyers, and a lot of people have lost that trait of how to sell. So number one, sales effectiveness, is a huge element. But then the second thing is, if sales effectiveness doesn't show up, they're like, well, we're just going to cut price, and then it becomes a price chasing game. And what you're saying is the idea that, well, rather than cutting price, what you really should be doing is adding value to your offer. And tell me a little bit about what that means.
Sure. But before I do, I thought I should probably stick on the subject of my story a little bit here, because your podcast is about mindset as well. And one thing I would tell anybody, when I tell you how I went all the way to the bottom, and when I was on that bottom, let me tell you, I was drinking a lot more. I was in victim mode, victim mentality. I felt, why am I being, in my mid 40s, starting all over? Why am I living in a motel, paying rent from week to week, after having lived in a, very large home with acre and a half lot in the middle of Windermere, 7 cars in the driveway, to now, you know, uh, holding on to the last car that was paid off, and
Mm.
and waiting tables and what have you. And the mindset of victimhood was, I was listening to my dad in my mind. Is it because I'm Hispanic? Am I being held away from for positions because I'm, not white enough or whatever the hell? English accent, Spanish accent, what could it be? And I had all these reasons to blame everybody but me, until I finally grasped the idea that I know what it takes. I have what it takes. I've been there before. I've owned multiple businesses throughout my life and career. I've been successful in the corporate world. I'm bilingual. I mean, I can do it, and I can do it again. And went back to basics, reading some of my favorite books from people like Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, um, and others. And at the end of the day, pulled it back together and pulled resources. And this is another thing a lot of people don't do, and that is I pulled the power of resources with networking. The people and can you bring that? Can you work with people trust the people and do business with them? And we got together with three other partners that I had that we had previously worked with, not as partners, but as colleagues and what have you.
Mm.
We pulled our resources of mostly our minds because none of us had a lot of cash, but together we bootstrapped a business and it really took off and it's grown into multiple businesses since. And I am a lot better off than I ever was back in those days. So
But
mindset
when
is
we look at,
everything, really.
yeah, when we look at the first thing, because I want to chime in a little bit because you've hit two really, really, I think, extremely important topics. When you talk about the mindset and the mindset of winning that ownership and taking true ownership of the world that's around you, that things don't happen to you, they happen because of you. And once people can really start to understand that, they move from that victimization mindset to that ownership mindset. And as soon as you own the world around you, you can now start to control the world around you rather than react to the world around you. And so what you were doing is you said, look, I'm moving out of that mode and I'm moving back into control mode. Because yeah, there was a 2008 whatever crash, that sort of thing. But then they say to you, okay, that's great, what are you going to do next? And that's exactly what you did. And then you did the next best thing, which was, there's a saying that says, show me your five and I'll show you your future. And the idea is you said, look, I'm going to look in my network. I'm going to find the people who are heavy hitters in my network that I'm going to be able to build and grow with. This is exactly what Dana White did when he started the UFC. He went and said, who am I going to go with? And the Fertitas brothers, networked and got into those guys and was able to get the UFC going to what it is today. And you followed the exact same model. Find the people, get the heavy hitters, start growing, and then builds massive success.
Absolutely. And, too many entrepreneurs, I think, do go at it alone, attempt to go at it alone, don't even hire people because they want to do everything on their own and a control freak or try to be an expert at everything. And if you're an expert at everything, you're an expert at nothing. So
Yeah,
you've got to build a team around you, whether that be partners that you're partnering up with or staff that you're hiring but building a team is essential actually, and that way you can divide and conquer and build a business like we were fortunate enough to do.
absolutely. Now, you moved into the idea of where we first start off this whole conversation was the idea of creating value. And I think that's something that's really important when we talk about not only in the relationships with our peers, our family, our community, but it's also a relationship with our clients. And when we're talking about the relationship with our clients, a discount really at the end of the day hurts both parties. I just saw this with a construction company where, they were into the situation. They started, people stopped paying. And so they started running into some money challenges. So they needed to get some urgent jobs, but the job market was kind of drying up. So what's the first thing they do? They start discounting their prices. And so they start discounting their prices. So now they start working for lower margins. Now, in that situation of lower margins, they also ran into some manufacturing problems. And so now they don't have the margin to absorb it. So now they're in a situation of they probably need to close their doors, and that's going to hurt them. That's going to invariably hurt the client. So the idea of that discount, that doesn't help anybody. And so the idea of an add in value, which is what we started, mid-process in talking about. Talk a little bit about what that means to you.
Well, what it means to me is, again, at the end of the day, realizing discounting can be devastating if you, let's say, for example, let's explain why real quick. If you've only got, let's say you got a 20% net profit at the end of the day after all expenses, your overhead, everything else. And so 20% is what you got left over. If you discount 10%, you don't know your numbers. A 10% discount, is as little as that sounds, is 50% of your profit. So you may have to double or triple your sales to end up with any gain out of your 10% discount. So and that's hard to do. So what you want to, I always recommend with my community. We have a community of over 30,000 entrepreneurs on our Facebook group and within our community. But we're always talking about, how do you add value? How can you create your value stack in your offer? I recommend a great book by Alex Hormozi, building it's 100 million offers, on how to create the perfect offer, which is about creating that value stack that you feel stupid saying no to. And that'd be one great book I recommend you go read, on how to create your perfect offer for your perfect niche.
Yeah,
And
let's talk a little bit about that for a second, because I think that's a really important element. And I love Alex Hormozi's book. I usually have 3 copies of it right there. It's actually right here in the book. But I think it's a great book. And the idea of the offer, I think the offer is really important to start off with, because I think people don't realize how important the offer is. You can make a huge pivot in the value that you provide to your client based on how you structure your offer. So if your offer is structured in a way that it is a price-oriented offer. We had one client where he was doing software for a specific industry, and he was pricing himself against some of the big players that were very price-driven. So his whole thing was, how can we get to the point of making value at the dollar figure where they're going to? And I said, well, why don't we just go to a totally different market with the same product? He's like, what are you talking about? And so we repackaged the offer into a white label product, going to a totally different market. And now people are willing to pay extra, pay a higher amount than he ever thought possible for the same product. And it's because exactly. He had the right offer to the right audience.
And he talks about that specifically in that book, in how you might have something that you think is generically good for all businesses. But, if you can make your offer about, okay, I help plumbers with a solution for plumbers or for dentists or for a unique niche, and your development, your product is the solution for how to make, how to generate more clients specifically for plumbers. Well, a plumber is going to be willing to pay a lot more for that than a generic business might with the same packaging. And
Absolutely.
so can you create value for a specific type of person or a specific industry or a specific niche? And because you're focusing on that, you're going to get better at that for that particular industry niche. And therefore, you're going to be able to deliver more value, and then therefore hold your price.
Absolutely. I
And,
know
and
when
other simple examples of that. For example, instead of, for example, let's say you would prefer, you're a business coach and you want to offer, you'd like people to hire you for a minimum of 6 months. You know that if you're working with somebody, by the time they implement all of your ideas, they're not going to start seeing successes until month 4, month 5, month 6. So you need them to stay on that long, but hard to get people to commit to a 6-month contract. So, maybe you come up with, hey, here's the deal. If you hire me, when we reach our 6-month anniversary, I'm throwing the 7th month in free. More value that doesn't cost you as much money as it might be to say, hey, if you pay me for 6 months, I'll give you 30% off the price if you pay in advance. Instead of giving the 30% discount, you might say, pay for 6 months in advance and we'll give you the 7th month free. You're adding more value. It doesn't cost you as much to add that extra month as it would be to give even a 10 or 20% discount. Plus, you're setting the mindset of your clients to not do business, to wait until your next promo round, your next discount round, versus be willing to pay you.
Well, the other thing, what it does, I think, in that specific offer, I mean, some people would look at it and say, well, isn't that just a discount? And well, it technically looks like a discount because you're giving a month away for free. So that would be construed as a discount. But what you're really doing is you're trading a future value for a current purchase. But you're doing it on the basis of a commitment. And what that's going to do is, for that client, is that's going to create really good retention for that client. And we want that client, because if the product or service that you're providing is providing real, true value, it's going to take some time for them to get that benefit. And what you're doing is you're foregoing the discount until they've received the benefit. And so it's actually, it's a really good relationship, because you're both earning value at the same same time. And once they get paid off, you're giving them a prize. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, and that's just one example of many. Um, but another idea, of adding value that I've helped a number of people do, and that's, again, what is your network? What is your, do you have colleagues? Do you have others that you can partner with? So that, for example, if I'm selling a book or a training course, maybe I'll say, hey, when you buy our course, you get a portion of Steve's course included as a bonus. So Steve and I are collaborating. So when I sell my course, I give the first 3 chapters of Steve's course included free. When he sells his course, he includes the first 3 chapters of mine. And now we're sharing the leads with each other, and saying, hey, because those that got my starter kit, are leads for me that Steve sold. They got my starter kit. Now I can follow up with those people and go, hey, you've had our starter program. Let me introduce you to what comes next, and I might get to sell some of those leads Steve sent me and vice versa.
Yep.
And yet we're both adding more value to our original offer.
Absolutely.
Things like that. Who can you look to collaborate with? What add-on products or services might you add on versus dropping the price?
Exactly. No, I think that's perfect. Now, if people wanted to reach out to you, the best way to reach out to you would be marketingboost.com. Is that correct?
That's one way, but I even got a better solution. Actually, would be to go to marketingboostsolutions.com, marketingboostsolutions.com. And the reason for that site is there we have a myriad of products and services we offer to business owners to boost their business, including a free version of Marketing Boost with no credit card required. So you can go in there and see what we have to offer, which includes travel incentives you can use to boost whatever your business is, to whatever, enhance whatever your call to action is.
Beautiful. Well, that sounds like a great offer, and I'm really enjoyed our conversation today. And Marco, I think your story is something that people really need to pay attention to. That while you're riding on that edge of success, that there's always peaks and valleys that happen, and if we don't have the mental fortitude, be prepared for however deep, however high that peak or deep that valley is, and that commitment to ownership of that issue. I think it's going to be it's going to be something that can cause absolute peril. And what you showed is that with the right focus, you're unstoppable. So your story, I think, is an inspiration for a lot of people. And I think your approach on adding value to offers, specifically through what you're doing with Marketing Boost, I think is a fantastic thing. So, Marco, I really appreciate having you on the show.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Awesome, man. Well, you have a great one. And Money Mindset Mentoring Podcast. We'll see you guys on the next one.